Welcome into a new episode of the Sports Stove Podcast, brought to you by Skull Candy. Well, let's see here, right there, and Blue Coolers, and I'm hiding Blue Coolers. Sorry, Blue Coolers, back there as well. Skull Candy and Blue Coolers are the sponsor of the Sports Stove Podcast, and we have links for you in the podcast notes where you can click those links and go find yourself some candy for your ears if you want some Skull Candy products. They got headphones, earbuds, true wireless earbuds, by the way, speakers, and more. And Blue Coolers, look at this 55-quart cooler. It has a 10-day ice retention, 5-star rated. It is I think, a 5-year warranty on there as well. Sometimes called the Yeti Killer. Blue Coolers is the best of the coolers and a better price than the other leading companies out there. You know who we're talking about. So go to those audio notes, find the links for Blue Coolers or Skull Candy. Click on those links, shop there. And that way they know that we sent you. On today's episode, my dad is back to join us. We're going to be talking some football, a little bit of baseball, and a little bit of college basketball as well today. Dad, how you doing today?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Well, good to have you back. It's been a while since we had you on. Had a few interviews and things going on. We've got some more exciting interviews coming up that we'll post out next week. Packers fullback John Kuhn. Anything you want me to talk to John about since you're an owner of the Packers?
No. I just tell him as an owner I've been happy with him. So.
Okay, all right. John Kuhn will be with us, and then also Jack McCallum, who's a former Sports Illustrated writer. He's an author of the Dream Team book. He's also the author of 7 Seconds or Less, talking about the Phoenix Suns, and he has a brand new podcast out about the Redemption Team. It's a Dream Team Part 2 podcast, as well as the Dream Team Tapes podcast. So Jack McCallum will be on with us as well. At this point, I think the Jack McCallum podcast will be posted on Monday, and the John Kuhn episode posted on Thursday, I believe, is where that will shape up. But nonetheless, Dad, since the last time we talked and the last time I really did anything other than interviews, Carson Wentz got traded to the Indianapolis Colts. He is the new, we assume, starting quarterback. They only gave up a third-round pick and a conditional second round that can turn into a first round. I thought that was a crazy good deal for Indianapolis. So I guess what's your overall thoughts on the trade and Carson Wentz in Indianapolis?
Well, I think, again, it's very good for Carson Wentz. It's a good place for him. He's with a coach that he's had before. So I think that would be good. You're right. Indianapolis didn't have to give up a whole lot. Whether it was a good deal for Philadelphia will depend on, one, about how does Jalen Hurts do, or do they have, a quarterback there? If he does great, then, they're in good shape. They can use the third round this year. If the other one turns in, if Wentz plays a lot, which what I've read about it, I think that could easily turn into a first round pick. That could be very good also. So it could be good for both, but I think up front it does look good for Indianapolis, and I think it'd be a great place for Wentz to get a start. And I know I feel kind of like you on this. I think Wentz still is a good quarterback and has a lot of potential.
Yeah, Philadelphia, there's a lot of talk out of Philadelphia right now that at that number 6 pick, they're going to draft a quarterback, which to me is kind of crazy. I guess it depends on who's there, who knows what happens between 2 and 6. But, that means that there's not a great deal of confidence that Jalen Hurts is the answer in Philadelphia. And I'm a Jalen Hurts fan. I was big on him coming into the draft. I thought, but I can't say I expected him to be starting by year 2. I thought maybe it was going to be a 4-year process before he got the starting job. So we'll see how that shakes out. As far as Indianapolis goes, Carson Wentz, I think he's going to jump in and play really well in Indy. They got a little bit to fix on the offensive line, but they got some real talent around them. Of course, I'm a huge Jonathan Taylor fan at Indianapolis, running back out of Wisconsin. He's dynamic both in the pass game and the run game. And so I think Wentz will fit right in. Of course, he knows Frank Reich and played with him or for him while he was in Philadelphia too. So there is that also. Of course, the bigger story that's happened here in recent days has been the jersey number for Carson Wentz. Right now, the rumor is he's going to wear number 1. But Michael Pittman, who is coming off of his rookie season as a wide receiver, he came out and said, "It's my number, and I'm not giving it up." Now, we do know that they had a conversation about that. But what's the first thing that you think of? I'm curious to know, as we haven't talked about this, so I'm curious to know if the first thing that came to your mind was the first thing that came to my mind when a young wide receiver says, "I'm not giving up my number to a new coming quarterback," what was your first thought on that?
My first thought was wide receivers taking a real chance there because the wide receiver wants to have a great relationship with the quarterback. Quarterback wants to have good trust in his receivers, but a receiver needs to be where the quarterback is going to look his way, help him. Now, Pittman is very good. I was high on him last year as he got better as the year went on. I guess it's kind of an unwritten rule in the NFL that if you have a number, you have to give it up. I enjoy that because that's a little bit of tradition left in football. In some ways, it makes sense that the teams made the decision about the numbers. But if they did, unfortunately, we know numbers would change every 2 years because they sell more jerseys.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that a player can be known by his number and can go into the Hall of Fame with a number is good. But yeah, it struck me a little funny that a wide receiver wouldn't be quicker to get along with the quarterback. But from what it sounds like, Wentz may be okay with it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not sure that number 11's been great for Wentz over the last couple seasons. But yeah, I think it's interesting that, my thought was if he was a veteran receiver like T.Y. Hilton, for instance, okay, yeah, that makes sense that you wouldn't even consider it. And I don't think Wentz would even ask for it if it was T.Y. Hilton's, and I don't think he was going to ask for it for Pittman either, from what I understand. But my thought was, my goodness, like Pittman's career right now is going to go up or down based on Carson Wentz. You would think you would want to be on the. I mean, you'd probably. I don't know. It's silly to argue over jersey numbers, so I'd like to think they'd be adults about it anyhow. But nonetheless, Pittman's going to keep number 11. Like I said, the rumor is Carson Wentz will wear number 1, which I don't believe has been worn since Pat McAfee retired. And so listening to Pat McAfee talk about it was pretty fun this week, as he is excited, hoping that Wentz takes his number. But I was interested. A lot of the conversation early in the week about Pittman, it all just centered around him not wanting to give up his number and him doing interviews. And it wasn't until later in the week that I finally heard someone else say, he needs Carson Wentz to throw him the football. You'd think you'd be a little bit different about how you're going about this. And I thought, yep, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Speaking of quarterbacks changing teams, let's move on to Deshaun Watson. I feel like we've talked about Deshaun Watson almost every time we've been together. This more recently, though, it did come out that Watson has approved trade, said he would waive his no trade for the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Panthers. I've said from the get-go the Jets and the Dolphins make the most sense just based off of draft capital and what they give up for Watson. Carolina has talked very aggressively, like they're going to do everything they can to make this happen. They're sitting at number 8 in the draft. So out of those 3 teams, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Panthers, what do you think is best for Watson? And then what do you think is actually going to happen?
As far as best for him, the team, Carolina would be a very good team for him. I think a very good coach. Obviously, he has some good people around him there. I think it makes more sense for Houston, for the Jets or Miami, because they could get a quarterback and then they'd have a quarterback and then they're going to get some kind of good draft pick or a large number of draft picks, and they could help build up around that quarterback quicker. And I think either one would work. I don't know if Darnold or Tua, which is more guaranteed to have success, obviously, but I think from that standpoint, it would make more sense for Houston. For some reason, my gut feeling is that I'm not sure he'll leave Houston. I just don't know. I mean, surely they're going to do everything they can, but if they could get draft picks, it would benefit them more. So no doubt about that. And I don't know if he goes to Carolina, if Bridgewater's in the deal. I think Bridgewater's been good. Again, maybe he would do as well as the other 2. I don't know how that would go.
Well, I think Bridgewater's time in Carolina is done based off of what came out this week. I mean, they said they're looking for an upgrade over his physical limitations. Yeah. So that's usually not a good sign for him continuing with the team. Like you said, I think if the Texans, if they're going to lose Watson, it makes sense, I think, to go with Miami and the Jets, because then and somewhat depends on what they like, if they like Darnold or if they like Tua, because then you could get a quarterback plus a top 3 pick in the draft. You can rebuild pretty fast with that. I think Darnold's going to be good if he gets in the right spot. I've heard places like San Francisco and Washington come up a lot for Darnold. Would love to see him on either of those teams. Tua, I'm just not sure about. I think he needs more time. And I think Miami's a great spot to continue to grow in as well. I think either of those places would work. But I think Carolina is going to end up, if he leaves Houston, I think it's Carolina, just because they've seen the most motivated to go get him. I still think Vegas is a kind of a team to watch. If Gruden gets wind that, hey, we can get him, here's what we can get him for, I think that's a team to watch. But right now it seems like it's down to the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Panthers, with the Panthers being the most aggressive. And I've said it over and over again, I think Deshaun Watson's the top 3 quarterback in the league. I think any team he goes on, he makes them better. Yeah, and if Houston can keep him, they're paying a lot of money, and they gave up draft capital to get Laramie Tunsil, the left tackle. now he might not have a quarterback to block for. You would think they're going to do everything they can to try to keep Deshaun Watson in-house. And they've said they're not going to trade him, but we'll see if that actually happens or not. Let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. Their first-round pick last year, Isaiah Wilson, offensive lineman. Earlier, the Titans came out and they said the guy that we scouted was not the same guy that showed up to camp last year. He ended up playing 4 offensive snaps and 1 special team snap. And then this week, Isaiah Wilson tweets, "I'm done with the Titans." So I know that the Titans are not a soft spot in either of our hearts, neither one of us big Titan fans. But what are your thoughts on this whole Isaiah Wilson issue?
Well, the Titans, again, I was in Tennessee quite a while, and right before I left the last couple of years, heard a lot there because of the old general manager as a talk show host there now. And I thought about it. Isaiah Wilson was trouble from the get-go. You look at it now, if they've lost him, you say, well, they should have just got rid of him earlier. Very few general managers are going to want to admit that they made a mistake with the first-round pick, and they're not going to want to admit that early on there. So if the general manager is not going to take care of it, then I think it would be the ownership. Well, the Tennessee Titans are owned by a family, the Adams. And again, why it's not Bud Adams now, it's his daughter. And the Titans have always been very tolerant of problem people if they thought they were talented. Look at Pac-Man Jones. You go back to him. And then even people that were temperamental, Vince Young, and there'd be many others. They have the Adams, the Titans is an organization, and I don't know always the communication between the coach, general manager, and anybody in the Adams family. But they have a history of being tolerant. It's funny too, when you think of Pac-Man and general managers, the older general manager who drafted Pac-Man is the guy who's the talk show host now. And I heard that come up on several occasions, and I've never heard him come close to saying he shouldn't have drafted Pac-Man. Again, he said the same thing, well, we did our research and boy, that wasn't what we thought. But he constantly mentioned, Pac-Man was so talented. He's one of those unique guys that could turn things around, which in a return game he could. So again, there's just not a lot of history there. So if you think, well, then who could take care of it? Well, the coach can't because you don't have the general manager and the ownership behind you. The only way you can make it work is to have the player change his mind, change his attitude, and that would come through peer pressure. Other guys on the team. That was hard this year because of the COVID thing. In all fairness, you didn't have a situation where people were around each other a lot. And I think he was on the COVID list, so he was probably even less available than players would have been. Again, I'm not a big Titans fan, so it's easy to start jumping on things. But again, who's going to influence a rookie tackle? Well, it's going to be other offensive linemen. Who's the leader in the offensive line room at the Titans? It's Taylor Lewan. Taylor Lewan has never been accused of being a high-quality, high-character guy. So you don't have the guy there. Do you have a leader on the team? Titans have always, I think, struggled with that, but they don't have the leadership of somebody to point to, even if they say, hey, Isaiah, you need to go talk to this guy. Or if you have a guy that, hey, you need to go talk to him. I'm not sure they have that guy. It's interesting, again, not to get off here, but as we're Packer fans and the Hall of Fame, you had Charles Woodson. Charles Woodson played with two great quarterbacks, two very popular quarterbacks, and both of them pointed to Charles Woodson as the leader. Charles Woodson was the best teammate. They were people. He was one they could look to get help. And I'm not sure the Titans have anybody close to that. When Matthews was there, I think he tried to fill that role, but he wasn't there very long. And after that, I would question what kind of leadership they've had. And this may point out this year too, with not having the combine, it may be harder and harder for teams to really find out about the background on players. From what I understand, you love spending time with their coach, their strength man, people that really knew them, and somebody that would really level with you. And that's not going to be a lot of possibility. A little bit virtually, but it isn't like going visiting the school and sitting with them.
Yeah, and I heard one of the former general manager, I don't remember who it was, but he said the combine, really the only positive thing that comes out of the combine for teams is the interviews, having a chance to sit down and converse with these guys and sit down face to face and have a good long conversation with them right there face to face. And, the combine is going to be different this year. It's going to be held at the individual sites, and you're limited to who can go and all those sorts of things. So you're right. That definitely comes in. I think, honestly, I think as far as it goes to ability wise, it's probably better to not have the combine because you're not going to be fooled by false numbers or numbers that don't really stand out in the game time. But when you're talking about the personality, like you're talking about, yeah, that's definitely going to be the whole COVID situation. It's going to be interesting to see how much homework they do on these guys and what they can learn. And they'll still be able to they'll have sources in different schools and things like that. But yeah, Isaiah Wilson, he's done nothing to give himself any leverage in this situation. so it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. It looks like, from everything I can tell, the Titans are pretty much done with him, and he is done with the Titans. And honestly, it might be done with football. At this point, I don't see any organization that goes, oh, yeah, I want to take a chance on a kid who can't, first-round pick that refuses to get in shape and come to work on time and be where he's supposed to be. So they might be seeing the end of Isaiah Wilson. He may go down as one of the bigger busts in history if he never gets a chance to play because of his attitude and his work ethic. Let's go on a little bit more positive note. The report showed this week John Harbaugh, the Baltimore Ravens head coach, was out to eat. He was supporting a restaurant who the restaurant owner has done a lot for the Baltimore area restaurants and bars throughout all the pandemic stuff. Raised, I think I saw $430,000 that one restaurant owner did to help other restaurants there in the area. On his way out, John Harbaugh pays the tab for 7 families, the other 7 people that were in the restaurant with them. Kind of a positive note in a world of kind of darkness right now, don't you think?
Yes, it was. It was very encouraging to see that reported on. That's the thing. From what you hear, there's more good things go on with teams, with players, with coaches, but you don't have a lot of that. You have the Walter Payton Man of the Year. There's some things that they go on about, people helping foundations and what their foundation does, and that is good, but it doesn't always get national attention. I think the fact that it, this came up and was highlighted, and I saw it today come across, it's good to hear about a good story. And again, it's something, I don't think he had to do. It's just something, he obviously has the ability to do it. He gave his wife all the credit and said it was her idea, but he paid the tab, and it was just an encouraging thing. Again, never been a big fan of the Michigan Harbaugh, but John Harbaugh's always seemed to be real good. So I don't know. I'm sure there's good in all of them.
The Michigan Harbaugh, Jim. And I just was going to say the GM you're talking about in Tennessee is Floyd Reese, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just wanted to get his name out there. All right. Well, we talk about something positive. Let's go back to the negative. Major League Baseball pitchers and catchers are reporting baseball season's right around the corner. The sound of bats and balls and gloves and the smells of leather and all that good stuff is back. And one of the bigger stories in baseball right now is surrounding Major League Baseball's service time issue. Garrett Cole came out and told people, hey, you need to read what was going on in Seattle. Of course, the Seattle Mariners have a lot going on within their organization. One of their top prospects, Jared Kalenic, he has come out and said he definitely thinks that he has been his service time is being manipulated as it is. We talked briefly about this before we recorded, and I was interested in your take on it. So I'm going to let you have share your opinions on the Major League Baseball service time and the issues that are currently being brought up.
Well, I think again, it kind of shows the issue of where we're at in this country and as a society. I don't think it's good. It's probably not fair to the player, but it was interesting to me that they're talking about, oh, they're manipulating this, when I don't think it'd be hard to say most agents and even players will manipulate anything they can that they feel like is a benefit for them. I mean, it's been that way, unfortunately, for a while. People aren't straight up front with what they say. The owner owns the team. And if the system, if he's not breaking a rule, if he's not violating the system, I mean, it wasn't shocking to me. I was surprised it was news, because obviously people make decisions. You've seen it a lot on bonuses. Yeah. You play X number of games. Well, this guy all of a sudden doesn't play in the last 2 games. This guy catches X number of touchdowns, and all of a sudden, the last 2 quarters he doesn't play. Well, he doesn't get the bonus. Is that good? I don't know. Is it right? It just depends. Is it in the rules? And unfortunately, kind of that's where we're at now. If it's not breaking the rules, is it being fair? And honestly, with a guy that's a young player, you are taking a little bit of a chance. All of a sudden you make it to where it's going to hurt you financially. Now, if he turned out to be great, everybody be happy with all of it. But you don't know that. And, unfortunately, that's kind of where we are. I guess we've been that way for a while. I've never been a businessman, but I was involved in business deals for a while. And when I was, I got some magazines and articles about business stuff. And I'll never forget when I saw an article advertising a seminar, and it said the seminar was totally about how you get out of guaranteed contracts. In other words, you have a contract, the binding contract, how you get out of binding contracts. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting right there. Even though we all know a lot of times, people say there's waivers and you sign waivers. You buy a ticket to a football game, you can't sue the team that, if you fall in the stadium. That's not the way it works, but that's kind of where we're at.
Well, right now, one of the popular terms is player empowerment. The NBA and the NFL has both seen the players gain more power. The NBA more than any other league, but the NFL is getting there too. You're seeing that with Deshaun Watson trying to force his way out of Houston. Then the Major League Baseball is far behind on this stuff, but they're trying to catch up and trying to catch up quick. And it's funny. I didn't think of it, but you're exactly right. Everyone's trying to manipulate someone to better themselves, players, the agents, and the teams. And, we saw it last year, if I remember right. San Diego made the decision with Fernando Tatis to go ahead and let him come in and play. And it was actually going to hurt them when it came to service time as opposed to hurting the player. But he was so talented, they needed him on the field. I could be wrong. Maybe that was the year before that happened. But nonetheless, Major League Baseball does have this issue with the service time where the guys can't come up, can't play so much, can't do this, whatever, because it helps the teams financially to do so. I've never understood baseball. So many things about them. The way it's like they refuse to try to get better. They've got these talented young kids. Instead of letting them come up and play, they keep them down for financial reasons. Then you got a team who's got a great player, and they trade their one great player away, and they do it to restock their farm system, and then hoping in a decade they'll be good. But nonetheless, we see baseball continuing to kind of be behind on different things. And right now, the players, Garrett Cole leading the way here, trying to change the way things are done in Major League Baseball to improve or to give the advantage or leverage to the players there. Dad, let's close it out talking a little bit of college basketball. And Gonzaga and Baylor both undefeated. Looks like they'll probably end the regular season undefeated and head to the tournament as the top two seeds. Alabama's still rolling in the SEC with only one SEC loss. Kentucky, Duke still flailing back in the back, hoping that someone will let them be in the tournament from there as well. Uh, so a lot of the normal bigs are kind of lower or out right now, but one conference that seems to be standing out is a conference that you pay a little bit closer attention to than I do, and that's the Big Ten. You got four teams in the top 10. Michigan just beat Ohio State last weekend. Michigan, Ohio State, Illinois, and Iowa are the four teams in the top 10, all shoved together there. Juwan Howard looking really good in Michigan, got them playing incredible basketball. They have an interesting mixture, really good freshmen, but they also have some returning guys that are playing well for them as well. So talk to me a little bit about the Big Ten. I know you did some looking and research on these teams, Michigan, Ohio State, Illinois, and Iowa. Uh, Coming down to the end of the regular season now, what's it looking like for them?
Well, they're really, they're all four really good teams. Like anytime you have a strong conference, you have the problem with they can beat each other up. And the way the schedule works, all four of these teams are going to play at least two of the other teams in their last 3 or 4 games. Now, some are a little more on the road. I think all of Michigan plays Illinois and Iowa, but they're both at home for Michigan. That will help there. Ohio State plays Illinois and Iowa. Of course, Illinois then has Michigan and Ohio State both on the road, and Iowa has Ohio State and Michigan. So they're going to play each other. It's not guaranteed that the top two, Michigan and Ohio State, will win all of them. But it'll be interesting. And it'll be interesting when you get to the NCAA tournament because at least a couple of these teams are going to fall out a little bit. Illinois lost to Michigan State last night. And again, the teams also, a couple of Wisconsin and a couple of them play Michigan State yet. And so there's teams that can win because there for a while, Michigan State would be like Kentucky and Duke. I mean, they weren't there, but now they've made a move here at the end. And so you're going to have teams that are in 3 seeds, 4 seeds maybe, that are talented, very, very good. And, that can always make the tournament interesting. One thing you mentioned a minute ago about Michigan, and I heard this a while ago, and I think it's true with all 4 of these teams, was they all had veterans coming back. It wasn't just freshman teams. Some of their better players, they had guys come back for another year. Now, a lot of those guys aren't going to stay now, but they all had veterans to work with. And I've heard it said, it'd be interesting to see how that works, because for a long time it's been one and done. That's no problem. You can win, you can do fine. And here are some of the teams that are really, really tough. It isn't all freshmen. So be interesting to see how that affects. But it's going to be an interesting basketball tournament, that's for sure. Because even some of the teams, there's a lot of teams that maybe not even definitely not in the top 20, maybe not in the top 25, but have only lost 1 game. And you can get in there, and like I said, we all know what can happen. Now, and I think it'll be interesting with it all being there around Indianapolis. Yeah. That's going to make it interesting too. And they play a lot quicker. The games, this is a lot shorter period of time for the whole tournament. It's not stretched out over as many weekends. So when you talk about a team getting hot, that's going to be different too.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It looks like at this point we're still having conference tournaments, which for a while there didn't look like that was going to happen. So that gives a little bit of hope to some teams. I know the SEC is looking at 5, maybe 6 teams in. The Big Ten, they're looking at, I think, 7 teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams at least, making it in, maybe 7, possibly 8 as well. The ACC, they're kind of top heavy right now with Virginia and Florida State. Virginia Tech's in the top 25. They've not had a great conference run, but they've had good away out of conference things as well. And so North Carolina's probably going to make it to the tournament. So you got some different teams in the ACC that are trying to make their case known as well. I think it's going to be an interesting year for those mid majors, the smaller schools and stuff like that come in the tournament time that have those veterans. But like you said, the teams that are at the top right now have that. I mean, Illinois, I believe they returned 4 of their starting 5, and I think 5 of the 6 guys that played minutes last year as well. So they've got a real good veteran, and that's showing. Michigan, Ohio State, the same way. Of course, Gonzaga and Baylor as well. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. A lot of people are making the excuse for the Kentuckys and the Dukes that hey, COVID affected them more than anybody because they didn't have the time to get to know each other and all this kind of stuff. But to me, that's just a load of baloney. It's just they've had bad, at least at Kentucky. I've not watched any Duke games. Kentucky, it's been bad coaching, but nonetheless, I've said enough about Coach Cal this year. We'll just let it play out and see how it ends up there as well. All right. Anything else on the sports docket that's caught your fancy?
No, I don't think so. We covered some good stuff there, and we've got a lot going on. And like I said, before long, the NCAA tournament will, kick up, and that'll be there. And like I said, we'll see how things go with football. I guess it's all senior days, and I'm sure we'll start hearing before long. But it'll be wild predictions because it'll be less, who's going to draft what, and there. And I did hear this week, which of course is true. One of the big things with not having the combine is the coaches and general managers aren't all there together, and their general managers aren't there with all the agents. So there can't really be a lot of the communication that they had because, they'd be there for, of course, for a week. They're together. And so things will definitely be different with that.
Yeah, and you got baseball that's kicking up. We'll see how that gets going. Last year they were affected. Baseball dropped the ball last year.
Oh, yeah.
COVID stuff hit. They had an opportunity to be on the field and playing before anybody else, and they were one of the last people to get going again. You got the NBA All-Star game coming out. They announced the rosters this week. Everybody talking about how they shouldn't be playing and why are we even doing the All-Star game? And then they start complaining because they got snubbed from the All-Star game. That's going on as well. I'm just looking here. Shohei Ohtani, he had 97-mile-per-hour pitches during live batting practice, so he seems to be back and healthy again. Hockey stuff going on as well. Which we will be having on. We'll have a hockey conversation as a podcast here one of these days in the coming weeks as well from there. I want to remind people the podcast today is sponsored by Skull Candy and Blue Coolers. And again, we'll have the links for you on the podcast notes. And if you're going to go to either of those websites, please use the links in the podcast notes so that way they know that we sent you. And we're almost to camping season, fishing season kicking up and stuff like that. So everybody needs a new cooler. Blue Coolers is a great company. And again, they're top-notch coolers, and they're more affordable than the other leading brands. Skull Candy, earbuds. You can get stuff for $20. Of course, they got stuff that costs more as well, but earbuds and headphones and things like that as well. We sure appreciate Skull Candy and the Blue Coolers partnering with us on the podcast. And as always, we thank Belly Up Sports, bellyupsports.com for their support, and happy to be a part of them. All right, Dad, good conversation today. We'll have you back on again shortly. Again, like I said, we've got 2 interviews coming out next week. Jack McCallum, former Sports Illustrated writer, traveled with the Dream Team, has a podcast called The Dream Team Tapes, and has a new podcast that just got released called the Dream Team Part 2, or Dream Team Tapes Part 2, Redemption Team, Redeem Team. And then, which is the team with Kobe and LeBron and those guys, Carmelo, those kinds of guys. And then he also was author of the Dream Team and 7 Seconds or Less. It's going to be a great conversation. Really looking forward to that one. And then we'll also have on former Packers fullback John Kuhn, having him on, and hopefully get some good stories out of him also. So those will drop next week. And then starting again in March, we'll be talking about different things, hoping to continue to get some really good guests on and things like that. Working on a number of people right now for March, and we'll announce those as those get finalized. Dad, thanks for joining again tonight, and excited to see all your fan base listen to the podcast this week. And hopefully the naysayers, the people who've been mean to you, giving you bad feedback, hopefully they'll be satisfied with this podcast
There you
as
go.
well. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can follow us on Twitter at Sports Stove. We're also on the Instagram, the Sports Stove Pod. We're on YouTube. You can watch all the interviews that we've done and things like that. The Sports Stove Podcast on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you around the Sports Stove.